Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with the United Kingdom's ambassador to the United States, Dame Karen Pierce. It's so good to have you here at such a key moment. And I wonder, as King Charles III, and we start to see him in this role on the throne, what will change about the contours of the kingdom? And I ask that because, as I'm sure you've seen, there's been a lot written in recent days. In the New York Times, there was a columnist, Maya Jasanoff, who's a British historian, or writes about the empire, and she said that the Commonwealth really kind of glosses over some of the more bloody forms of British colonialism. She said, in her role as queen, Elizabeth helped obscure a bloody history of decolonization whose proportions and legacies have yet to be adequately acknowledged. It sort of kicked off a debate here. And I wonder how you think King Charles will deal with that. Is he mindful of things like this?
He's very politically aware and astute and very much aware of the world around him. I think his first task will be to go round the constituent parts of the UK, promoting a message of unity, one of respect for the late Queen, but also one of renewal. He'll want to show stability in unity and continuity, but he has made no secret of the fact there are things he'd like to modernise. So we'll wait and see what those are. He's a huge supporter of the Commonwealth. He becomes head of the Commonwealth, and that was decided a few years ago. He has gone on record as saying it doesn't matter what sort of government you have in the Commonwealth, whether you have a monarchy, whether you have a republic, whether you have some other form, you are very welcome in the Commonwealth. And he wants to do what he can to strengthen that partnership of equal nations. And I want to stress the equal. We can't pretend we have a different history. There are good things and bad, and we need to talk about them. But I think that assessment is too negative. I would say that one of the overwhelmingly positive things that came out of the Queen's 70 years was the transition from empire to Commonwealth, was the transition to having a fellowship of sovereign equal nations who will come together every 2 years, head of government and head of state level, and who do an awful lot, e.g. on trade, in between. So I think that's a positive legacy, and I think most countries in the Commonwealth would feel that.
The UK has had such tremendous change. 4 prime ministers in the past 6 years, a new prime minister just in recent days as well, Liz Truss. I want to ask you about the U.S.-UK relationship, because President Biden has made clear when it comes to relations, for him, protecting the peace in Northern Ireland is of utmost importance. And this looks like it could be a point of difference, because the U.S. has warned the U.K. not to hold a vote on this legislation that could affect the creation or not of a hard border between North and South Ireland. Do you believe that vote will happen? And what happens to U.S. relations if that goes ahead?
So I think the first thing to say is that the President had a very warm discussion with the Prime Minister when she was first appointed. They talked about the special relationship. They talked about what Britain and the US can do together, promoting democracy and open societies around the world, and the need to push back on authoritarianism. So, as the Queen herself said, what brings us together is far stronger than any individual issue that may divide us. We too in Britain, the Prime Minister, wants to preserve the Good Friday peace agreement in Northern Ireland. She and the President and the Irish government absolutely share that aim.
But she's also talked about scrapping parts of that agreement with the EU. That
is a particular agreement about trade, so that Northern Ireland can trade with Ireland, which remains in the European Union, and the mainland of Great Britain can also trade with Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom. And the difficulty arises precisely because we are determined to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. We accept that's an enormous gain of the Good Friday Agreement. It is hard to introduce trading arrangements that protect the integrity of the EU single market and protect the integrity of the United Kingdom single market when you haven't got a border. But we don't want to introduce a border. The legislation going through Parliament is not about a border. It's about contingency measures that the government could take if it needed to, if we cannot reach a negotiated settlement with the EU to make the passage of goods between Northern Ireland and Ireland smoother than it is now. There's lots of disruption to communities. They can't get the goods and medicine in Northern Ireland that they need. Government needs to sort this out.
There are a lot of challenges the Prime Minister faces, including economic ones, in large part because of Russia's war on Ukraine. Do you see political risk to the alliance in the months ahead?
No, I think the alliance, the NATO alliance, has shown that it is stronger than ever. There has been a remarkably united response to President Putin's invasion. The same is true as the transatlantic relationship between Europe as a whole and the United States more broadly. Leaders will be able to get together in the forthcoming UN General Assembly, where I think you'll see more outpourings of support for Ukraine. There's no doubt there is a cost of living crisis. That's not unique to Britain. We have introduced measures around energy bills and energy prices to try and help ordinary households. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer, our Treasury Secretary, was here recently talking to Secretary Yellen. We're looking together at how we can share best practice in what to do to help households.
Well, we will continue to follow closely in the coming days and weeks. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Ambassador. We'll be right back. A stunning retreat by Russia overnight as Ukrainian forces claw back parts of the south and east of their country. And as the war enters its 200th day, there is another significant development. This morning, engineers at Europe's largest nuclear power plant are shutting down the last operational reactor in an attempt to lessen the chance of catastrophe. CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Patta reports from Kyiv.
It's happening with lightning speed. Advancing Ukrainian troops in the northeast Kharkiv region are taking back lost territory. Despite casualties along the way, the gains have been rapid and dramatic. And it's taken everyone by surprise. Ukraine kept the operation a tightly guarded secret. For now, journalists have been banned from reporting from the front line. But across the region, the blue and yellow flag has been raised in towns and villages occupied for more than half a year. Victory in Kupiansk, a crucial logistics hub for Russia, as Ukraine rips down all traces of the invading forces. In liberated Balaklia, jubilation and tears. And the words these residents have waited so long to hear: everything's going to be okay, says the soldier. For 6 months we prayed you would save us, sobs this woman. It's a humiliating defeat for Vladimir Putin's men, who have been forced to beat a hasty retreat, and a clumsy attempt to save face from Moscow, who says it's withdrawing to reinforce troops in Donetsk. Ukraine has been emboldened by the steady supply of Western military aid, but it needs more to keep the momentum going, says the mayor of the now occupied Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov.
But it depends how quickly our partners will give us weapons, how quickly our partners will give us heavy equipment military.
Right now, Russia still holds around a fifth of this country.
Nobody expects this to be over quickly, but Ukrainians are daring to hope today that the war could be starting to swing their way. These are the most significant battlefield successes since they crushed Russia's attempt to seize Kyiv at the start of this nearly 7-month-long war. Margaret?
Deborah Patta in Kyiv, thank you. And we are joined now once again by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. Madam Ambassador, good morning to you. An incredible past few days for your country. I wonder, as you have this progress, if concern is growing that Russia will resort to more brutality to respond to the success Ukraine has had.
Well, our 200 days fall on the September 11, and we know this pain and we feel this pain in Ukraine. We know how it is it when terrorists attack you at home. So we always have to keep in mind that Russia still can do a lot of damage. But we don't have any other choice. We will advance. As we said before, we will not surrender, and we will liberate all Ukraine, because this is what we have to do, not only to restore our territorial integrity, but to save all of our people who are under occupation. And we see from the footage from more than 1,200 square miles, which have been liberated during the past literally 8 days, the most fast counteroffensive since the World War II. We see how they are meeting and greeting our armed forces. And we also, unfortunately, see already the signs of the brutal war crimes that have been committed there, no different from what we saw after we liberated the Kiev Oblast. So we have to win, and this counteroffensive shows that we can win, and we are repeating the success that we had in the Kiev Oblast.
Retired General Ben Hodges told our David Martin that Ukraine's military could push Russia back to the borders that existed pre-February 24th, when the invasion happened. And that could happen before the end of the year. Do you agree with that timeline?
Again, this operation was possible because of the resolve of the armed forces, because our commanders, from the president to every commander in the battlefield, are so devoted to the victory, but also because 40 million of Ukrainians are supporting this effort and fighting for our country. But more importantly, because our partners have increased all the support, and we're getting more and more of the weapons and equipment that is so needed for that. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we would like to liberate all Ukraine as soon as possible to stop the suffering of the people and to restore our sovereignty. But whether it will be possible before the end of the year, we are ready to do it before the end of the year, and hopefully we will have everything we need to do so.
The Biden administration made some announcements of further support, $2.2 billion in long-term military financing for Ukraine and its neighbors. This was just in the past week. $675 million package of heavy weapons. Your foreign minister tweeted this morning that now it's about schedule, schedule, and schedule. So you're getting these pledges. Is there a complaint it's not arriving fast enough?
We don't have any complaints. If you look at August and September, we see that the announcements are very regular, and we're getting a lot of announcements on a weekly basis. We also see, and it's very important, and it has been a highlight of this Secretary Blinken's visit to Kyiv, that we're not only talking about what is necessary right now for us to win today, but we are increasingly discussing the long-term support and everything that we need in order to build what we call the enduring strength. So the USAI package that was announced, $3 billion, that was announced on the Independence Day, and this $2.2 billion, out of which about $1 billion will go to Ukraine in the foreign financing, is not only what we need now, but also what we will need in the coming months and years in order to be able to defend ourselves.
How much longer does this war last?
It will last until we win. And we definitely would like it to be shorter, because the Russians are not only attacking us, they're attacking Europe, the energy crisis, the food crisis, everything they're trying to create in order to not only attack Ukraine, but every democracy that is together with us fighting for the democracy now. Mm-hmm. So the faster we do it, the faster we will return to rebuilding and renovating our country, but also to some kind of normal life in Europe and globally. Now,
how should people understand what is happening now with the nuclear reactor in Ukraine?
The situation is totally unacceptable from any type of international standpoint. The Russian armed forces that shouldn't be in Ukraine in the first place, and definitely shouldn't be at the nuclear plant, which is the largest nuclear plant in Europe, are putting in danger the lives not only of Ukrainians, but also the whole region by being there and doing the things. But
shutting down the reactor, does that avert catastrophe?
Well, we're trying everything possible, and Ukrainians who are there at the station, despite of the fact that they're there under the guns all the time, trying to do everything possible to minimize the risks. Mm-hmm. So we are forced to do it, we are forced to shut it down. It's not a complete resolution, the complete resolution is for Russians to get out, to implement the recommendations of the UAIA, and to demilitarize the plant, which means that Russians should leave. That will bring the safety. But in the meantime, again, the Ukrainian personnel there is doing everything possible in order to avert any type of catastrophes.
The last time you were here in April, you told us that there were roughly 91,000 Ukrainian children who had been taken from their families and brought into Russia. Has there been any progress in bringing them home? You asked for the U.S. to help with this.
We are asking everyone, and unfortunately with this, fortunately with the counteroffensive, but we see already that during the counteroffensives, Russians are trying to move more kids from the territories which were liberated prior to the liberations to Russia. So this issue of identifying and finding every children that Russian stolen from us and return them back safely is still one of the top priorities. And hopefully, after we win, we will be able to get them all back.
Very quickly, should we expect your president to come to the United Nations in the coming days in person? Can he leave?
Well, it all depends on the situation on the ground. So we cannot say anything right now, but hopefully we will be able to have more good news from Ukraine and more territories to return home.
That'll be significant. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. We'll be right back in a moment. We turn now to the continued efforts to restore clean water to the roughly 150,000 residents of Jackson, Mississippi. The city's mayor, Chokwe Lumumba, joins us now live from Jackson. And Mr. Mayor, we welcome you to the program. You don't get more basic governance than running water. When can your residents turn on the faucet and not have to worry?
Well, first and foremost, Margaret, thank you for having me, and thank you for lifting this circumstance up. Fortunately, we have some level of good news to report that all residents have had water pressure restored to them. They have yet to have the boil water notice lifted, and so there are still concerns around the consumption of that water. Right now, as many repairs and adjustments are taking place in the triage period of where we are at the water treatment facility, there's also investigatory sampling taking place. And so we believe that it's a matter of days, not weeks, before that boil water notice can be lifted. But I would note this, that we have been here before where we've been able to restore pressure. We've been able to lift boil water notices. But without the significant capital improvements to take place, it still is a matter of if, not when, these things will happen again.
I want to talk to you about that.
When, not if. I apologize.
I want to talk to you about that capital in a moment, but we also have learned that there is now a federal probe of the drinking water crisis. The spokesperson for the EPA's Inspector General told our Avery Miller that the investigators are already on the ground in your city to speak to local officials. Do you know the scope of this? Are your actions as mayor being investigated?
Well, first and foremost, I think that anytime you have an event of this severity take place, then you should expect more questions and more investigation, and I think we should be open to that. No one has talked to me. I do not know the scope nor the timeline in which they're investigating, but I can share that to the extent that they will be speaking to city employees, I will direct them to cooperate with any investigation. We look forward to more information so that we can get beyond this.
Well, there was a similar investigation in Flint, Michigan, as you know, years ago. It ultimately led to 9 indictments. Do you expect similar action in your city?
Well, I can't speak to the analogous nature of the Flint, Michigan circumstance in Jackson. I can share with you that I am unaware of any criminal activity on behalf of individuals here in the city of Jackson. However, what we do want is a greater understanding of where failures have been taking place. We know that our administration, and in fact, administrations past, have been pushing for corrective action to take place for a long time.
Yeah. You mentioned the need for capital. In March 2021, federal government sent $42 million directly to the city as part of the American Rescue Plan. In August 2021, President Biden said this when he signed off on the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Never again can we allow what happened in Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Mississippi. Can never let it happen again.
It's happening again. In fact, it's getting worse. Where's the money? Why isn't it?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, first and foremost, I've had very extensive discussions with the president and the vice president concerning the federal government's desire to help, and we look forward to that. We have committed the grand majority of our ARPA funds towards our infrastructure, not only at the water treatment facility, but distribution lines. We've spent $8 million on one pipe alone to South Jackson, which is disproportionately affected. It is also critical for people to know that the city of Jackson didn't get $42 million at one time. Merely a little over a month ago, we got our second tranche of the funds. We have made a commitment to spend all the remaining dollars. There was some choice to spend some towards public safety issues. And so we are committing the lion's share, the overwhelming majority of our funds towards this challenge. However, it is insufficient to meet the great need of 30 years of deferred maintenance and accumulated challenges. And so it will take a coordinated effort on not only the local, state, but federal levels as well.
And what does that mean? Federal taxpayer dollars have been allocated here. Why can't the White House get that to you faster?
Well, I believe that there is a full intent to do so. I think that there is a process by which you identify the different pockets in which the money lies and creativity needing to take place. I can share with you that there has been full cooperation and communication at the highest levels, whether it's the administrator of the EPA, Michael Regan, who speaks to me consistently about their effort and desire to help, whether we're talking about the czar of the infrastructure bill himself, Mitch Landrieu. We've all been in communication and about the timeline in which certain portals open. I think that a major portal that is necessary to fund Jackson opens in October.
Do you believe that, as you've said in the past, state lawmakers have been racist in their treatment of your city?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I'm not backing down from any, characterizations that I've made. I think that they were made in honesty. However, I think that this is a time to focus on the solutions for our residents. When people go prolonged periods of time without water pressure and even longer periods of time without an ability to consume it, they really aren't trying to be bogged down in the political disputes that ensue. They just want solutions, and that's where we're focused.
Understood, and we will continue to track what is happening in Jackson. Good luck to you, Mr. Mayor. We'll be right back. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Margaret Brennan.